In Christian Basics, Lesson 18, this is on the 8th commandment. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. Now this is talking specifically about courts, and it's kind of amazing that, well, there's like a double amazement, or maybe a triple layer of amazement on this, that every society has courts. In the ancient Jewish world, the courts were at the city gates, so that the men who sat at the gates, people would come and they'd hear the case and they'd make judgments. There was the Sanhedrin, which was the 70 rulers appointed. That's what Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, said that Moses ought to do. Remember, Moses people were coming to him one after another, and all day he was sitting there making these judgments, and he was worn out, he's just dying there, trying to be so busy. So Jethro said, appoint men over rulers, wise people who can help you out. And so he invented the Sanhedrin. That's the 70 ruling elders. That was a court. In the Roman world, it's interesting. They would have a bema seat, a judgment seat, in the city square. So the Roman cities would have these sort of central plazas, and they'd have businesses all around like this, and maybe they'd have an arena, or they'd have a temple over here, and they'd have the shops, they'd have the forums and stuff. And then they would have the government buildings, and outside the government buildings was the bema seat, or the judgment seat. And you can see this in the ancient world. You can they go to Ephesus or Pergamum or Corinth. The bema seat's right there in Corinth or Philippi, and you can see the place where the proconsuls would go, and they'd sit there. And amazingly, it was just like court was out in the open. And so you could, if someone stole something or whatever, you just grab them and you drag them to court. That's why they could take Jesus and drag him before Pilate. Like in the morning, they call him and he goes and he sits in the judgment seat. And now they're going to have a case right there in front of them. They had their Jewish case all through the night with the Sanhedrin, illegally, by the way. And then they're going to go and have the Roman case. And so the kings were also judges. It's an interesting thing to think about in the ancient world. Like Solomon, for example. Remember, he was sitting there and people would come to him and they would bring their cases before him. So these two women, they both had children and one died, and they were fighting over whose live baby that was. And Solomon comes and says, well, cut the baby in half and give half to each mom. And the true mom says, no, she can have it. And Solomon knows wisdom belongs with life. And so he makes that judgment, and everyone is amazed at his wisdom. Now, the interesting thing about this is that we've separated the kind of the executive chair and the judgment chair, making laws, executing the laws, and adjudicating the laws, or the three branches of government. But that's all part of the government. It used to be kind of consolidated in the king. Now, the point, though, is that almost every society has a courtroom, and so that's kind of one. And it's then to realize that also the heavenly throne is also a court, that there's a heavenly court. And I don't wonder if we're just supposed to think about this, that our own earthly courts are shadows, are reflections of the fact that there is a courtroom in heaven, and that truth is to be told. So the 8th commandment is first setting about making sure that truth is told in the court. Shall not give false testimony or bear false witness against your neighbor. So there's to be a truth telling. That's why when you go to court, you take an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God, even. There's the oath that truth will be told, and truth must be told if justice is to be meted out. So the 8th commandment is chiefly setting us to be honest when it comes to the courtroom, but it's more expansive than that. That there's an honesty that's required of all people. You know, we say this in our little sayings, like a man's name is worth more than all his riches and stuff like that. That if you know someone is a truth teller, then you can get along with them. You can make deals with them. You can buy and sell. You can trust his word, and so forth. And so the 8th commandment is about this kind of truth telling, and especially for the Christian. The Christian has the command to speak the truth in love and to honor and protect our neighbor's name. And really, that's the gift that the 8th commandment is protecting, the gift of a good reputation. It's an amazing thing to have a good reputation, and it's a terrible thing to have a bad reputation. If your name is good or your name is bad, so much of your life is affected by that. So we are to honor our neighbor's reputation and do everything we can to protect their good name. That starts with, in the most basic breaking of the 8th commandment is gossip, to where we go and we talk bad about other people and we tear them down rather than build them up. That's not how it should be. This kind of thing should not be known among us. There's a couple places in the scripture where it'll be listing sins, and it'll talk about murder and adultery and blasphemy, and then it'll mention gossip. Whew. Wow. I didn't know that was so. I was like, I'm going to put murder up here and I'm going to put gossip down here, but gossip is simply murdering a person's reputation. And for whatever reason, sometimes we're trying to tear the person down so we can build ourselves up. Sometimes there's all sorts of different reasons why someone would gossip. We like love, our sinful flesh loves to hear bad stuff about other people, to hear the bad news, and so bad news travels halfway around the world before good news even is laced up its shoes. Who said that? Like Hercules said that or something, I don't know. So here the 8th commandment is God protecting our own name and our own reputation. And he says, just like you protect that person's life, and you protect that person's marriage, and you protect that person's family, and you protect that person's stuff, now also you protect their reputation. The virtue and vice of the 8th commandment is a little bit, we can come at it a couple of different ways, but what if we say it like this? The vice of the 8th commandment is going to be bitterness, where you're despising your neighbor in your heart or something like this. And let's say that the virtue of the 8th commandment is going to be edification, that you're protecting your neighbor's name and doing everything you can to build it up and give them a good name. So not listening to slander and things like that, but rather speaking well of them. And as we used to say it in the catechism, putting the best construction on everything. So when your neighbor sins against you or offends you or whatever, you want to assume the best of that person and not the worst. So there it is, Teaching Christian Basics, Lesson 18, the 8th commandment.